Hello creatives, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be showing you how to animate simple objects in Adobe Animate CC. Today we will be learning how to animate a Ferris wheel. I have the file in the description bar down below. I actually also have a complete video on how to illustrate this Ferris wheel. If you want to see that and follow along, click up on the top right hand corner and you can go ahead and see that video. It'll also be down in the description box below. Let's start by setting up the stage, and you will choose a new HTML canvas. And that will give you a standardized stage with a timeline. Next, we're going to import the file, and the way to do that is to go up to the top taskbar and click on File, go down to Import, and import to Stage. Or you can press Ctrl R on your keyboard and it will do the same thing. So now that you have your file on the stage, make sure under the dialog box that pops up, you click on the option that transforms the stage to the same size as the file. So usually for my Illustrator files, I keep it to 1280 by 720. So you just click that little dialog box when you import the file and it will make the stage the same size as your Illustrator file. Once you have the file imported to the stage, you will see all of your layers popped up on the timeline with all of their names to the left. From there, we're going to change all of the layers into symbols so that they can be movable, because right now they're all graphics and we need them to turn into symbols so that we can move them. The way to do that is to click on your first layer, and what I like to do before this step is to change the layer names so that you know exactly what each item is. That way you're not guessing through the whole program, and all you gotta do is just double click on top of the layer name. It usually just says layer whatever number, and you can go ahead and give it a name. Like for instance, for the Ferris wheel, I did like larger outer circle, inner circle, base, and so on and so forth. Let's go ahead and do that first, just so you don't lose your place in what you're actually moving. Once you have chosen the name for your first layer, what I like to do is be very efficient. So I like to create the symbols as I go along. Double click on that first layer name that you created, and it will be highlighted in blue as a selection. You can press Ctrl C or Command C on your keyboard, press Enter, and it will deselect the name and just have the layer name itself on the timeline highlighted in orange. Then you can press F8 on your keyboard and that will be the shortcut for convert to symbol. You will see a dialog box come up. You can press Ctrl V or Command V on your keyboard in the name dialog box, and that same layer name will pop up there. It's much easier just to be consistent with these, and then make sure that movie clip is selected under type underneath the name dialog box, and then press OK, and you will have a new symbol. Now that you have a new symbol created, you can go ahead and insert a motion tween simply by going up to the top taskbar, clicking on Insert, and then going down to Motion Tween and clicking on that. You will see that the symbol next to your layer name has changed. It is no longer what looks like a new piece of paper. It now looks like a box that is moving. You will also see a new bar on the timeline pop up, and that will be highlighted. So you can go ahead and click on the last frame, click and drag all the way as far to the right as you like. Standard setup for the timeline is 24 frames per second. You can change that if you wish, but just know that every second is split into 24 frames. So if you want to drag the motion bar by seconds or by frames, it's completely up to personal preference. I personally do seconds. And congratulations, you just made your first motion tween. This will be repeated for every single layer. So go ahead and make sure that you get a nice flow going. It's probably a good idea to set up any keyboard shortcuts under preferences in the program if you wish. For instance, inserting a motion tween does not normally have a keyboard shortcut, but I put in my own command for it. My command is M for motion, just to keep it simple and consistent. Plus, it's very easy to remember M as motion. You can make it whatever you like. That way, when you are working and you're working very quickly, you can just hit the keyboard shortcuts rather than going through all the taskbars and everything like that. It saves quite a bit of time when you're going through every single layer, especially when your animations start to get more and more detailed. But this one's pretty simple. So let's continue double clicking on the layer name, changing it to a name that matches the object on the stage, then pressing Controller Command C, pressing Enter, clicking on F8, or going to modify, convert to symbol, and then pressing Ctrl or Command V to paste the layer name in the name dialog box for the new symbol, making sure that the type is set to movie clip, and then pressing OK. And we're going to do that for every single layer. This segment of setup is going to be very tedious, so you want to make sure that you get a good flow going, put on some music so that it doesn't seem so daunting, and we're just going to continue doing that for every single layer. As you can see, I'm going very quickly through this because I have my keyboard shortcuts set up and I am using those to make this process a little bit faster. And after we have done all of that, we are then going to start moving the object. You may or may not have heard of the term keyframes. Well, that's what we're going to be messing with now. As soon as you have all of your layers named and all of your graphics converted into symbols and the motion tweens applied, we are then going to start adding keyframes. Keyframes are moments in time where things can become movable from one frame of time to another frame of time. I'm going to show you how to move an object from one position to another within set keyframes. For the Ferris wheel, it's going to be pretty simple. We're just going to be rotating everything that moves on a Ferris wheel. So pretty much everything except for the base and the very center circle. So go ahead and choose all of the layers that contain the bucket seats, if that's even what they're called, and the details inside the Ferris wheel, as well as the outer circle. And we are going to choose the rotate tool, which is on the right toolbar. It's the third tool down. You're going to choose the time rate at how fast or slow you want the Ferris wheel to move. I chose between 1 and 2 seconds, so somewhere in the middle, about 1.5 seconds. And I put the playhead, which is the red pointer on the timeline, I positioned that at about 1.5 seconds. Now you can choose to manually put in your keyframes by going to Insert Timeline Keyframe, or by going to Modify Timeline, Insert Keyframe. Or if you want to set up your own keyboard shortcut for it, go ahead and do that in the Preferences panel. My keyboard shortcut for keyframe is just K, again, keeping it simple. You can insert the keyframe now on the timeline, or you can just click and drag on the stage the items that you're going to be rotating and rotate them ever so slightly. You will see the original position of the objects that you were moving. That way you can see how far you want the objects to rotate at the speed you're going. I just chose to rotate it slightly because Ferris wheels move very slowly, and then you can go ahead and review that back by dragging the playhead back to 0 and then playing for the first 1.5 seconds. And congratulations, you just made your first motion in Animate. You actually made the Ferris wheel move. It's fairly that simple. So we're just going to continue to do that until the Ferris wheel looks like it has made a complete rotation all the way around. Don't worry if you end up losing your place. That is why I had all the bucket seats, if that's what they are called, made into different colors, because that way you can keep your spot a little bit more. And also keep in mind that you can always just go ahead and drag the playhead across the timeline. That's called scrubbing the playhead, and that will show you how far you have come and how much more you need to do. So we're just going to continue repeating this over and over and over until we get a full rotation for the Ferris wheel. You do want to keep the movement of the Ferris wheel fairly consistent. When a Ferris wheel moves IRL, it's very slow, very steady, and it has a very solid, smooth movement to it. So in order to replicate that, make sure that on the timeline, you are placing your keyframes the same time limit apart. Just make sure you're consistent and placing the playhead at the position on the timeline that you want to set your next keyframe, and then that way it gives you a solid, consistent, smooth movement instead of the timing being off or awkward, some of it going faster, some of it going slower. Once you are done placing your keyframes and moving the Ferris wheel for one full rotation, go ahead and play it back and see what you think. I think it moves pretty well, except for the bucket seats. Do you notice how those don't move independently of the Ferris wheel itself? Well, in real life, the bucket seats if that's what they call them, that's what I'm going to call them. They move independently so that they can stay upright so that people don't fall out because they're on their own axis. So we're going to kind of play with that and make that a little bit more realistic. So go ahead and go back to your timeline, drag the playhead back to 0, and we're going to choose a time that works well for the axis rotating for each bucket seat individually. This will take a little bit of time, but that is okay. So I dragged my playhead to about a little more than half a second, and I noticed that the bucket seats should have rotated by now. So we're just going to keep it to half of whatever your original time rate was. So since mine was 1.5 seconds, I'm just going to call it at a little bit more than half a second. And we are going to choose the bucket seats individually because we want them to move individually, and we are going to place a keyframe. Or fun fact, if you just rotate the bucket seat by itself, it will place the keyframe on the timeline for you automatically, which is great because then you just knock out a whole step. So I'm going to rotate one of the bucket seats and it'll place that keyframe right on the timeline of where I last left my playhead. And then that way you can see when we move from 0 to 1.5 seconds that the actual bucket seat is going to rotate as well and stay upright. Now with doing this for every half time rate of the Ferris wheel moving, you do want to make sure that you go back to the full time rate. For me, it's 1.5 seconds, and you want to make sure that the bucket seat still rotates all the way through to that time. So I'm going to place my playhead at just over 1/2 second and then place it again at the 1.5 seconds, and I'm going to make sure that I rotate the bucket seat at both times just to make sure that the bucket seat always stays upright. And you're going to continue to do that every half time rate and every full time rate. Another thing to note is that while you're doing this, you want to make sure that all the bucket seats line up at the same time rate of them staying upright. So you want to rotate them at the exact same time every time you rotate them. And we are going to continue to rotate the bucket seats individually all the way until the very end of the timeline that you chose. Do keep in mind as well, if you end up messing up, it's okay. There's always an undo button, which, is very helpful. Or you can just go back to the previous frame, see where you started, and then that way you can know where you're going when you get to the next time frame that you want to position the bucket seats. I actually scrubbed the playhead quite often just so I made sure that I didn't lose my place or that I didn't miss any of the bucket seats rotation at all. Once you have reached the end of your timeline and you have successfully rotated every single bucket seat into the correct position, you can then play this back as much as you like, and you can see how everything moves together. You can actually see it on the screen right now, and you can see that everything moves together, but the bucket seats actually move independently as well, and that pretty much looks like a real life Ferris wheel, only animated. The only thing left to do now is to export the video, and you can very easily do that by going to File, Export, and then Export Video, and a little dialog box will pop up, and you will go ahead and choose the file folder that you want to save it under, and then you can just press Export, and the program will export all of the media for you, and then you can open up the video in any kind of media player that you have, and it will play it. The video does export as a .mov file, which is a .movie file, which pretty much any media player can read, and it's also very easy to pop that up onto YouTube as well. If you have Adobe Media Encoder, it's very simple to convert. So that is how you animate a Ferris wheel using simple objects. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope you learned a few tricks. If you want me to do more tutorials, go ahead and leave me a comment down below asking and giving me any suggestions of what you want to see being animated. I will be doing character animations pretty soon, so look forward to that. Go ahead and leave me a like and subscribe if you aren't already, and I will see you in the next one. See you soon, creatives.